Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's a great audience, and I think before I begin, I'd really like to touch upon this very, very thought-provoking, session by Rahul. I am, as a person, I'm an optimist, and I fundamentally believe that the world is full of people like myself. There will be people who will try and disrupt, and when I say disrupt, don't look at the disruptions in terms of the new innovations, but look at it from a disruption which has a negative connotation. So I fundamentally believe that there will be people who will always be out there to create havoc and to create chaos. And thankfully, we have people like Rahul and his company who are there as gatekeepers who will eventually protect us. So I'm a firm believer that as long as we have to live, we have to have faith in the human race, and we have to have faith in all our abilities and our abilities to love and care about each other. So on that note, today I'm going to talk about a story about mankind, about humanity, and about how the evolution of man has happened over the last 200 and 250 years. Now, I don't know how many of you are ardent fans of history or how many of you have studied economics, but I can do tell that in this audience, a lot of us are consumers of technology and internet. I do also believe that a lot of us are aware of how our parents or our grandparents or our forefathers used to operate in a world which was a lot more civilized than what it is today. So we were essentially an agrarian society. And then, post the Industrial Revolution, we've now reached at a level, at a time when we're witnessing the digital era. So without much ado, let me sort of, why do I see these two slides? I should only see one. Sorry about that, the second slide should happen. Yes. Thank you. So let's very quickly dig a little back in time and understand how have we evolved as a society, as a culture, and as people. So on the first part of my slide, you will see that we are talking about the pre-industrial era, which is self-explanatory. So like I said, we've essentially been a farming civilization. Our entire life was surrounded by farms, and our whole purpose of existence was to do farming for our own self-consumption. Over a period of time, we moved into the era of industrialization, and that's when, in late 1840s, the first industrial revolution happened. Does anyone know what happened in the first industrial revolution? And I won't include, the senior professors because I'm sure they would know this. Anyone? Okay, I won't get to that. So the first industrial revolution was largely around the innovation and the introduction of the steam engine. Steam engine was the first, catalyst that actually helped to propel the economy the way it has. And with the help of steam engine, a lot of manufacturing was driven around steam engines. A lot of factories got built in that time because, like I said before, we were a farming country, and then we became a sort of a manufacturing country. And what also incidentally happened in that era was that a large amount of people and population got segregated and got created around large factories, which eventually became large cities of the future world. Moving on, we came to the second industrial revolution, and this was the time when electricity happened. Now, just close your eyes for a minute and imagine that you lived in a world where you had no electricity. And suddenly, you have electricity which suddenly gives a lot of light to the future world. So with the invention of electricity also came oil and gas, and then that further helped propel the economy to where it finally has evolved to. The third industrial revolution, which we believe, which a lot of historians and economists say still exists, is the era where the adoption of the digital world, the adoption of computers, the adoption of cybersecurity, or the lack of it, if I may, has happened. And today, I think we are standing at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution. I think if you look around, you will see that we are probably a very few fortunate lot who would experience how the world will evolve in the next 10 to 15 years. If you would talk to your parents and your grandparents, they tell you about the era that they've seen, which is pre-independence and post-independence. But I can confidently tell you that the kind of changes that you and me will witness, and hopefully we will all live, will be path-breaking. Until a few years ago, people would talk about self-driving cars, and we would laugh it over. But today, let's accept it that that's not a far-fetched reality. Today, self-driving cars exist. The likes of Toyota, Ford, Tesla, and even and these are largely car manufacturing companies, but even the likes of Google and Uber are actually experimenting with working prototypes of self-driving cars in the Silicon Valley. So this is the world we are living in. I was also reading another report which was published by the World Economic Forum, and the Global Council and the World Economic Forum in 2013 predicted that by the year 2026, and that's not far, by the year 2026, a certain percentage of our board of directors will be actually machines. These will be people who will be artificially intelligent machines, and they would be taking decisions for the growth of the organization. And that era is not too far away. We're also living, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of these big names that I'm going to talk about, big terms: augmented reality, big data, chatbots, virtual reality, smart cities. These are just to name a few examples of the kind of things that we are experiencing and that will explode over the next 10 to 15 years. I believe that the fourth industrial revolution will present machines and humans with completely new capabilities. The world of tomorrow is not far away, where all of us will be planted with a chip, a microprocessing chip, which will not only monitor our health and how we are doing as a person, biologically, but even mentally, and would also recommend what needs to be done to sort of fix some of this. I think the big question now, honestly, is how well this transformative technology will become an everyday reality, and how will we coexist as human beings alongside technology. And I think the future is unknown, but I fundamentally believe, and I really would encourage all of you to sort of be aware and conscious of the reality that is going to hit us in the future. I was also reading another report by Frey and Osborne, and these are two economists who actually shared a future employment report, which basically talks about what are some of those jobs that will be taken by robots or technology, and what are some of those jobs that will be left with us. And incidentally, the findings were remarkable. All the jobs, and actually 90% of the jobs that we do today as humans, will become obsolete in the next 15 to 20 years. And I think that also sort of implies to the way some of our education systems will sort of, evolve over the next period of time. So if you read a lot about education and how the new education system is evolving, you will see that the whole old jargons of pushing people to STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is sort of now moving away. Because fundamentally speaking, a lot of these jobs which are in the STEM industry will be taken over by technology and robots. What we will be left with, things which we are born with as humans. Things which are more on the right side of the brain. And I hope you understand what is the left side, the difference between the left side and the right side. The left side is analytical, things are rational thinking, and the right side is all about emotions. So moving on, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. When I was much younger, and I don't call myself young anymore, I'm 38 right now. But when I was a lot younger, I started my career way back when I was 19 years old. I started working with a company called MakeMyTrip.com, and MakeMyTrip happened to be just an accidental discovery. My colleague here, my fellow speaker, was asking me how did it happen, and I told him that it happened while I was playing snooker, and someone came and said, "Look, and I was also a musician, by the way. So in my previous life, I used to play the guitar. And I'm not sure if all of you have seen, the movie which is this Akhtar guy, Javed Akhtar. No, not Dil Chahta Hai. The one Farhan Akhtar, the movie in which he's a Rock On. So Rock On actually came much later, but I promise you that that story is really, really an inspiration, and that is the story of my life. So I've played at weddings, I've played at Durga Puja pandals, and that was only, I did that because I wanted to make extra money, and that's how my career started. So Make My Trip happened accidentally, and as a child, I was always exposed by my parents to always look at very inspiring people. I was always exposed to some of those people and those stories by virtue of me, being exposed by way of them telling me. And I always thought in my head that what is that one thing that has made these people successful? So until I became 23, 24, I became a little more matured, I always almost thought that the barometer to measure the success of these people was directly proportional to the amount of money that they have made. And that was my barometer. So why was A person rich and why B was not? And that was the barometer that I had. And then I felt that, is the whole law of inheritance really something that we should be very proud of? Why should someone, by virtue and by law of inheritance, inherit a lot of wealth and then they eventually become successful just because they have lots of money? And the people are senior professors sitting here who actually slog a lot. They work very hard and they've spent their entire youth in sort of giving and shaping a brighter future for kids like yourselves. And I almost always felt that the people who need to be rewarded most should be the people who are doing the larger things for the society. Of course, this is a very right side, very right-wing sort of an approach, and I know that we live in a capitalist world, and not everything that I would say would be true or would be possible, but that's what I fundamentally believe. So while this whole thing was happening in my head, and I was confused, and I was thinking, why is this guy doing so well? Ye kyun itna ameer hai? And I realized that it has nothing, and then over a period of time, when I moved from Make My Trip to Airbnb, and I was the managing director, I set the business up, I started to derive patterns. I was thinking in my head, what are some of those patterns that I can pick which define success for these people? And you know what was one common thing that came across? One common theme that came across was the conviction. The other common theme that came across was their ability to trust themselves and the team that they were working with. Their ability to not only trust the team and the people that they work with, their ability to also trust the product that they built, their ability to trust the consumers that they were dealing with. And I then figured out that I think the single most important thing we as humans need to do is to work on something which is called as reputation capital. This reputation capital is a phenomena that is being talked upon since the last 7 to 8 years, and I'd encourage all of you to sort of think about this. But before we dive deeper into reputation capital, I'd encourage you to look at some of these brand names. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, right? So let me now take you to this new world of the sharing economy. Why do you think, and if I was to give you a combined valuation of all these companies, we're looking at a little over $200 billion of market cap. Combined net worth of all these companies. And these are essentially companies that are driven by people. These are essentially companies that are built on a single currency which is called trust. And trust, my friends, is something that only humans can have. I don't expect robots to have the capability because they don't have the right side of the brain. And trust, my friends, is the most important, single most currency that you should start building upon from now if you've not already done that. In my opinion, trust and reputation capital is the only thing that will stay along with you for the longest period of time. You may live today, you may not live tomorrow, but the only thing that you will be known for is the reputation and the trust that you've built, not only for yourselves, for your friends, your families, and the network. Today we are living in the world of sharing economy. Someone mentioned Bitcoin, there is Ethereum, so a lot is happening. But what is interesting is that all these companies are pivoted on a single currency of trust. The other thing that I'd ask you is that I don't know if some of these screens look familiar to you, but on the left on the top is a guy called Jasper. He's an Airbnb host. On the right is a screenshot of a rider, or actually a driver called Elizabeth, who's a driver on Airbnb, on Uber. On bottom left is a guy called, I think is Olin, who is a TaskRabbit. I don't know if you know TaskRabbit, but TaskRabbit is essentially a company which outsources normal jobs to people to do. Now, what is happening in this whole sharing economy is that by virtue of you consuming and being part of this trust network, you're almost compelled to review and rate someone else who is a stranger. What is also happening is that all of us sitting in this room end up believing in strangers who have been reviewed by strangers like ourselves, and we tend to trust them only because there have been positive reviews written by someone who was like a stranger, right? And I fundamentally think that this trust currency is going to be here. It's going to be here for the long run. And like I said earlier, the sooner we start building on our reputation capital, the better it'll be for us. This concept was curated by a woman called Rachel Botsman. She's a visionary. She's been talking about sharing economy since the last 7 to 8 years, and she says that there are three distinctive pillars of the trust economy or the sharing economy. First, as an audience, as a group, as a person, you have to trust the concept. So if you're someone who believes in the concept of sharing, a lot of people are also saying that ownership will become a thing of the past. The youth of today and tomorrow is someone who is more open about the idea of sharing. So first you have to understand and appreciate the concept of sharing. Once you understand that, you will move to the aspect of trusting the business. And the last is trusting the peers within the network. Think of it this way. I'm sure a lot of you are consumers of Amazon. Now, when you go to Amazon, what happens? You have to buy a certain product, and you see a list of a few sellers. Certain sellers have a certain higher rating over someone else, and price being the same. What do you end up doing? You end up actually choosing the product from the seller who has had a higher rating from someone else. Similarly, on Zomato, you order food, and this is food coming to you, to your doorstep from restaurants that you've never sort of heard of, but you end up trusting in the ability of someone else who has rated them. And that's the whole thing about the sharing economy. I also believe that some of these archaic systems of verification, these archaic systems of credit scores will become a thing of the past. I fundamentally believe that in the next 5 to 7 years, we will see a technology emerging which will sort of act as an aggregator of all social footprint, digital footprint, and all the trust that we are building across networks, and this would probably look something like this. And imagine if you and me tomorrow had a chip in our body, or maybe we were wearing Google glasses. Even before I would talk to you and even before I would transact with you, I would have an entire social graph of what you have done as a person, what you have done as a business person. Am I able to trust you, or am I not able to trust you? And I think that is something that is going to happen in our lifetime until we live. This is, like I said, trust as a currency has already been talked upon. It's been covered, and I would really insist that all of us sort of get up to building the trust. Trust and reputation capital is like a breadcrumb, and it follows you. It is yours, it belongs to you, and it will stay with you for the longest period of time. Just to conclude, and I'm going to refer to this something that I've written. Moving forward, I think we need to always remind ourselves that technology will continue to challenge us and outperform us for the betterment of the human race. And the future will be about collaborating and doing things what humans do best. I'm a firm believer that the future, it will be the survival of the humanist. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.